Hey there, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, a place for stories told one moment at a time. If you want to support my channel, being here already means a lot. Now take a breath, and let's get started. I'm going to rewind this to where it actually started, not where people want it to start. No screaming streets, no burning skylines. It began with regular days that felt slightly wrong, the kind you ignore because you still have a job to finish, and a kid who needs dinner and a bill that doesn't care about the news. I'm Jack Norton, chief builder, foreman, the guy who gets blamed when a schedule slips and gets called when a foundation cracks. I've built projects that carry hundreds of people every day, and I've watched how fast order disappears the second you remove one key piece from the system. That is why I never trusted the idea of rescue. I've seen too many "we'll get to it soon" promises die on a clipboard. I also spent years wasting nights on conspiracy streams and private chats. I'm not proud of it. I'm also not going to pretend it didn't help. Most of it was noise. A lot of it was people selling fear. But the habit trained one thing into me: treat early warning signs as real until proven otherwise. Because waiting for proof costs time you don't get back. That mindset irritated my wife Sandra in the early years. She didn't call me stupid. She didn't ridicule it. She just wanted me present. She runs dental front desk and billing, and she lives in the world of practical problems. Someone's insurance gets denied. Someone's tooth pain makes him angry. Someone misses a payment and still wants service. She keeps a place functioning. She doesn't like drama. Our daughter Lucy is 10. She's stubborn in a way that doesn't come from being spoiled. She just likes control. And she notices when adults start lying with their tone. She's the type to sit quietly and watch the room until she knows who is scared and who is acting. I didn't realize how valuable that would become until the days when nobody could afford to miss details. We lived on the outskirts of Washington, District of Columbia, far enough that the city felt separate, close enough that everything still flowed through us: commuters, supply trucks, news cycles. If something broke in the region, it echoed outward. Years before the outbreak, I'd bought land outside the city through a connection from work. It wasn't secret. It wasn't hidden behind a gate with guards. It was a normal lot with trees, a slope, and enough space that neighbors weren't right on top of you. I'd been building a house there slowly, the way builders do when it's their money and not a client's. A little each season, a little more when a job paid out. The house wasn't finished, but it was livable. Drywall in the main bedroom and one bathroom, a functioning kitchen, heat that worked when power worked, a well that could give water as long as the pump had electricity, plus a basic filtration setup I hadn't upgraded yet. Septic installed, not the dream setup I'd wanted, but usable. I had a temporary power pole and a generator for job site use, and a small tractor with a backhoe attachment for grading and drainage work. Sandra called it my oversized toy. I called it the reason I didn't have to hire a crew to dig every time I wanted to move dirt. I also had a chain link fence. Calling it a fence makes it sound serious. It wasn't. It was a thin, symbolic barrier that kept deer from wandering into stacked materials and kept random people from cutting across the property. It was never meant to stop a person who wanted in. The first sign I couldn't ignore didn't come from a screaming stranger in the street. It came from a workday that fell apart in a weird, uneven way. 3 days before everything snapped, I was running a commercial renovation near Tyson's. Busy site, loud work, people rushing. I was doing my normal walk, checking safety and progress, trying to keep subcontractors moving without pushing so hard that they got sloppy. My phone buzzed with a local alert about an incident at a hospital. The wording was strange. Not shooting, not riot. It said something vague about aggressive patients and staff injuries. That sort of notice usually comes with clear instructions. This one didn't. It read as if somebody didn't want to name the thing out loud. At lunch, a drywall guy had a video on his phone, a shaky clip from a parking lot. A man in a hospital gown lunging at a nurse, security grabbing his arms, the nurse screaming, the man biting. The clip cut out right after the bite. Probably because whoever filmed it ran, or because a security guard slapped the phone away. Most of the crew reacted the same way. Jokes, disbelief, a few nervous laughs. Nobody wants to accept a new reality at lunch on a Tuesday. Then it came closer. The safety guy on the neighboring site called over because an ambulance pulled up and a worker had collapsed and gone violent. I walked over out of instinct. When you run crews, you respond when something breaks. 2 paramedics had a man on the ground and were trying to keep distance while still doing their jobs. The man's mouth was red. I couldn't tell what it was. He jerked against their hands and snapped his head toward movement. Not confused, not drunk. His eyes were open but wrong, fixed on the nearest warm body. He tried to crawl at one paramedic. The paramedic stepped back and the man followed, dragging a knee that looked injured and not caring. Police arrived fast. That's what fooled everyone into thinking it was contained. 2 officers, then another car, then somebody in a supervisor shirt. They talked him down by staying out of reach and using hard, flat commands. The man didn't respond to language. He responded to proximity. They got him on his stomach and cuffed him. It looked almost normal until he started wrenching against the cuffs and making a sound that didn't fit any category I wanted in my head. Not a scream, not a cry. A broken, rough noise that kept coming even when he ran out of breath. I went back to my own site and tried to finish the day. My hands kept pausing on tools. My eyes kept drifting to the road. Workers started leaving early, one by one, each with a different excuse. Family emergency, kids sick, something at home. Nobody wanted to say the real reason out loud. That night, instead of going home, I drove out to the land. I told Sandra I wanted to check on the build site, make sure nobody had messed with anything. That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. The truth was that I needed to stand in my unfinished house and listen to the quiet and imagine what it would feel like to be there when roads were jammed and services were failing. I wanted to see what I had, what I lacked, what could be fixed fast, and what couldn't. I walked the perimeter with a flashlight, checking the chain link, checking the locks on the storage shed, checking the tarp covers on the stacked lumber. The place looked the way it always looked after a long day of work. Rough, half-organized, full of potential, full of jobs not finished. I should have felt calm there. Instead, I kept thinking about that man on the gravel, and how fast a routine moment turned into something that didn't belong in normal life. Sandra called, while I was standing in the framed living room staring at studs. She asked if I was spiraling. Not cruel, just direct. She knew my habits. She knew my late-night rabbit holes. I told her I wasn't spiraling. I told her something felt wrong. She said the whole world felt wrong lately, and that Lucy had a school project due, and she didn't want Lucy scared over internet rumors. I said I understood. I drove home. I didn't sleep. The next day was worse. Not dramatic, just heavier. Another local advisory. Hospitals asking people to avoid emergency rooms unless necessary. Reports of assaults and unprovoked attacks. Sandra texted me from her dental office that a patient tried to bite an assistant during an argument about a bill. That should have been ridiculous. It wasn't. She wrote that the man had been sick for 2 days with fever and confusion, according to his wife. By afternoon, Lucy's school sent an email about possible closure and early dismissal. Parents in the neighborhood started pulling kids home. Stores got busier. You could see it in small signs. More cars in driveways midday. People dragging extra trash bins to the curb as if clearing space. Someone buying plywood at the hardware store and strapping it to a sedan in a hurry. That night I got a call from Eric Holden, a gunsmith I knew through local work connections and range talk. Eric is not a conspiracy man. Eric deals in reality because his livelihood depends on people's fear being honest. He didn't start with small talk. He asked if my family was close. Then he told me dispatch calls were getting strange and frequent. Attacks, bites, people not responding to pain the way they should. He said he didn't know the cause, but he knew it wasn't a normal riot or a one-day flare-up. He said to do whatever I needed to do before roads got clogged and before electronic payments went down. I sat at the kitchen table after Sandra put Lucy to bed. The house was quiet. Sandra watched me the way she does when she already knows something is coming. I told her I wanted us out at the land full time. Not soon, Not if it gets worse. That night, Sandra didn't argue for the sake of arguing. She asked 2 questions: how sure I was, and what the plan was. I told her I wasn't sure of the cause. I told her I was sure of the pattern. When officials use soft language and hospitals start asking people to stay away, something is already out of control. When the system falls behind, panic spreads faster than response. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once. She said she wanted Lucy calm. She said she wanted her parents brought in if possible. She said she needed a checklist, not a speech. So I wrote a checklist. It wasn't fancy. It was the same kind of list I make on a job site when a storm is coming. What must happen first? What can wait? What resources are time sensitive? The first items were simple: pack basic clothes and bedding, gather important papers, fill every container with water while the tap pressure still exists, charge everything, load food, load tools, move to the land. The next morning, we loaded the car. Lucy watched us do it with the quiet of a kid who senses adults are trying too hard to act normal. Sandra kept her voice steady and kept giving Lucy small tasks so Lucy didn't stand around absorbing panic. One comfort item, one practical item, Sandra told her. Lucy chose a stuffed animal and a small flashlight, then tried to act embarrassed by her choice even though she held the stuffed animal against her chest the whole ride. Traffic was thicker than normal even that early. Gas stations had lines. Some people were honking and yelling. I didn't stop in that first wave because I didn't want to be trapped in a parking lot argument. We got to the land with enough fuel. I told myself I'd handle fuel after we were staged. Once we arrived, Sandra went straight into making the house function. She tested the stove, checked the water pressure, checked door locks, found the windows that didn't latch properly, and jammed them with small pieces of wood. She picked an interior space that could become a safe room if something got inside the main structure. It wasn't a bunker. It was a finished room with fewer windows, solid walls, and a door that could be reinforced. Lucy got her bedroom in the most finished area because Sandra knew a child needs one place that feels stable. I walked the property line and looked at the chain link fence and felt annoyed at my past self for treating it as anything more than a suggestion. Then, I looked at the stacks of materials I already had and felt the opposite. Relief. I had lumber. I had fasteners. I had tools. I had a tractor. I had the start of footings along parts of the perimeter where I'd planned a decorative low wall. Not for defense, for looks. But concrete doesn't care why you poured it. Footings are footings. The first day was supply runs. I set my rules before I ever started the truck. No going into a packed store. No arguing. No trying to be the hero in a parking lot fight. No carrying a visible weapon in public unless I had to. Buy boring things that keep you alive and keep you clean. The closest supermarket looked tense the moment I pulled in. People moved fast with carts piled high, not neatly stacked, just shoved full. A woman yelled at a man for taking the last case of bottled water. The man yelled back that he had kids. Another woman tried to cut in line with a cart full of diapers and got blocked by someone who didn't care about diapers. The air felt hot even though it wasn't warm out yet, because fear makes people move and talk harder. I walked past the snack aisle and avoided the stuff that makes people feel better but doesn't keep you alive. I bought canned vegetables, beans, rice, pasta, flour, oats, cooking oil, salt, shelf-stable milk, peanut butter, canned meat, soups, coffee for Sandra, drink mix for Lucy. I grabbed water jugs, storage totes, bleach, disinfectant, soap, trash bags, paper towels, baby wipes, a cheap bucket. I bought medicine where I could: pain relief, anti-diarrheal, allergy meds, electrolyte packets. At checkout, card readers were still working, but lines moved slow because people argued about limits and cashiers looked ready to quit on the spot. I kept my head down, paid, loaded, left. I didn't make eye contact with anyone who was shouting. I didn't want to be pulled into somebody else's breaking point. Back at the property, Sandra was already filling containers. She filled the bathtub. She filled every bottle we owned. She filled a big storage bin and covered it with plastic and tape. Lucy was writing labels in marker, careful and quiet. Food bin, cleaning bin, medical bin, batteries. It made the chaos feel smaller. That was the point. I did 2 more runs that day. Big box store for batteries, flashlights, a propane camp stove, extra propane canisters, tarps, rope, nails, screws, duct tape, work gloves, a basic first aid kit, and cheap solar garden lights. The second run was to a farm supply store for feed buckets, a manual siphon pump, and more basic tools. Fuel came last because fuel meant a line. The station I chose had a line spilling onto the road. People honked. People got out of cars to argue. One man tried to cut in and almost got punched. A woman screamed because her kids were in the back seat and men were swinging arms 10 feet from her window. The cashier shut the pump off and shouted that nobody was getting gas unless everyone calmed down. That worked for about 30 seconds. Then people calmed down because they wanted fuel more than they wanted to win. I filled my tank and every container I had. I paid with a card that still worked. I drove away before the argument could restart. That night I called Sandra's parents. No answer. She tried too. She sent texts. Lucy asked if Grandma and Grandpa were coming. Sandra told her they were going to visit and stay safe. Lucy didn't argue, but Lucy didn't look convinced. On the morning we started counting as day 1, the news finally used a phrase that sounded closer to the truth. Officials called it an aggressive infection affecting behavior. They told people to shelter. They told people to avoid hospitals unless absolutely necessary. Schools announced closures. Some police departments issued statements saying they were overwhelmed and focusing on emergency response only. That message mattered because it meant the system was already behind. When officials start rationing language, they're also rationing response. Sandra read the statements with her jaw tight and said, "We're on our own." She didn't say it with drama. She said it with the flat tone she uses when insurance rejects a claim, and there is no appealing it in time. I made one more trip, the one I'd been avoiding because it meant committing to the worst possibility. I drove to Eric's warehouse. I didn't bring Sandra and Lucy. I told Sandra where I was going. She didn't like it, but she didn't stop me because she understood the world had changed, and a locked door is only a locked door if you can defend it. Eric's warehouse was behind a strip of small businesses. The bay door was half down. He waved me in fast and shut it. Inside, it smelled of oil and metal, normal and almost comforting. Eric looked exhausted. His eyes flicked toward the door too often. He didn't want to be doing business. He wanted to be done and hidden. I told him what I needed. 2 pistols, a shotgun, ammunition, cleaning supplies, a hard case, and any extra magazines he could spare. Eric named a price that was ugly, triple what it should have been. I stared at him. He stared back and said he wasn't proud of it. But he had a wife and he needed resources too. I paid because time was worth more than money now. I bought 2 pistols in 9mm and a pump shotgun in 12 gauge. I bought several boxes of ammunition, more than I'd ever planned to keep on a normal day, but not so much that I lied to myself about how long it would last. Eric warned me not to treat guns as the solution. He said noise would bring the wrong attention. He said the second wave of danger wouldn't be infected. It would be people who saw your light or heard your generator and decided that you had supplies. From there, I went straight to a wholesale building materials yard. While online payments still worked and rentals still existed, I rented a box truck on my phone and got lucky. The clerk who handed me the keys looked pale and kept glancing at the television mounted behind the counter. He didn't ask much. He just wanted me gone. At the yard, it was controlled chaos. Forklifts moving fast. Managers barking about limits. Customers arguing. One man tried to buy every bag of cement on a pallet. Another grabbed lumber and tried to walk without paying. Security didn't look eager to fight him. Security looked eager to get through the day without being bitten or stabbed over a stack of wood. I bought what mattered for perimeter work. Fence posts, chain link rolls, tension wire, concrete mix for posts, gravel, sand, bags of cement, treated lumber, plywood, metal straps, hinges, padlocks, gate hardware, rebar, where I could find it. I skipped the fantasy items and focused on things that become barriers, reinforcement, or repair. I loaded the truck myself where I could and waited for forklift help when I needed it. Every minute there, I felt exposed, as if the world was closing in from the edges. Driving back, I passed an intersection where a car had jumped the curb and hit a light pole. People stood around staring, not helping, not calling an ambulance, just watching. That's when it hit me that the social contract had already started tearing. Not because people were evil, because people were overwhelmed and afraid, and they didn't believe help would come anyway. Sandra stepped onto the porch when I rolled the truck into the driveway. Her mouth opened slightly when she saw the load, then she closed it and nodded as if confirming a decision she'd already made in her head. Lucy ran out and stopped short when she saw my face and the hard cases. Lucy went quiet and stood close to Sandra. We set rules immediately, not because we enjoyed control, but because rules keep a family from ripping itself apart under stress. Lucy stayed inside unless one adult was outside. Doors stayed locked. Windows covered at night. No yelling across the yard. No running around the property. If I said get inside, Lucy got inside without debate. Sandra backed that up with the tone she uses when she wants a kid to understand it's not a negotiation. Lucy tested it once with a complaint. Sandra shut it down. Lucy didn't like it, but Lucy listened. I stacked materials under tarps off the ground on pallets, weighted down so wind wouldn't slap them and broadcast noise. I moved cement into the driest part of the garage and wrapped it in plastic. I set up a simple lock system on the garage door. I parked vehicles to block the driveway in a way that still allowed escape if we needed it. I shut down the generator and listened to the quiet. In the distance, I heard sirens, then more sirens, then nothing for a while, then sirens again. Day 2 started with fence work. It was not glamorous. Dig post holes, set posts, mix concrete, level, brace, weight. Chain link requires tension. If you don't tension it properly, it sags and turns into a ladder. I built the first line where it mattered most, the driveway and the road-facing side. Access control comes first. A perfect circle comes later. Sandra's work inside never stopped. She created zones. Food storage in one area, cleaning supplies separate, medical supplies separate, tools separate. She set up a hand-washing station near the entry with soap and a bleach water bucket and towels that were designated dirty or clean. She created a trash system that sealed smell, because smell draws animals, and animals draw attention. Lucy helped with lighter tasks, carrying small items, labeling, taping cardboard and fabric over windows to block light leakage at night. Sandra's parents still didn't answer. That silence started as worry, then turned into a heavy presence in the house. Sandra didn't cry in front of Lucy. She just moved faster, cleaned harder, organized tighter. That's how she held herself together. Lucy asked about them again. Sandra said she didn't know. Lucy nodded and went back to her room and shut the door with more care than a kid should need. Day 4 was the first time I saw one of the infected near our road. At the time, I didn't have a clean word for it. I called him a sick man in my head because that was easier. I was tightening fence wire when I heard footsteps on gravel and a low, broken noise. I looked up and saw a man stumbling along the roadside. His clothes were torn. His hands were smeared dark. He moved in a jerky way, one leg dragging slightly, but he didn't stop. When I hammered again, his head snapped towards the sound. His attention locked onto me with a focus that didn't match a normal sick person. He turned and walked straight at the fence. Not cautious, not curious. Straight, driven, and fast enough to matter. He hit the chain link and grabbed it and started shaking it. His mouth opened and his teeth clicked against metal. He pressed his face into the fence and kept pushing, hands sliding on wet wire. He didn't flinch at scraped skin. He didn't hesitate. It was all forward motion and hunger. I backed away, keeping distance. I thought about the shotgun, then stopped because shooting would echo. I tried a long piece of scrap wood first, jabbing through the fence to shove him back, trying to break his contact with the wire so he couldn't pull on it. He snapped at the wood, missing, then went back to the fence, pushing again. That was the moment my mind stopped pretending. I went for my pistol. I didn't point it at his head because I'm not a movie character, and I wasn't going to gamble with a miss. I aimed at center mass, because that is what a person does when he needs the target to stop. I told him to stop. One time, more out of habit than hope. He didn't slow. I fired one shot. The crack rolled through the trees and across the unfinished siding. The man jerked, staggered, then kept coming, slower but still coming. I fired again. He dropped to the ground, rolled, tried to crawl, then stopped. I stood there with the pistol up, watching for movement. Nothing. Sandra opened the door a crack. I held up a hand for her to stay back. Lucy was behind her, peeking through the gap. Sandra looked from the body to the fence to my face and understood what had happened without asking. She said low, "Move it away from the fence." She wasn't being cold. She was thinking about the next one, and the next one, and how bodies piled against fencing become steps. Dragging a body is hard work and it is not clean. I used gloves. I used a tarp. I pulled him away from the fence line toward a low spot near the creek. I didn't have time to bury him. I didn't have the stomach either. I covered him with brush and tarp far enough that it wouldn't be the first thing anyone saw, and far enough that smell wouldn't drift straight at the house. I hated it. I did it anyway. That gunshot changed our relationship with the neighborhood. Within hours, curtains moved in nearby houses. A door opened. A man stood in his driveway and stared toward our property, then went back inside. I didn't see him again. The quiet that followed didn't feel safe. It felt watchful. From day 5 onward, I stopped trying to make the place look normal. Normal was gone. My new goal was to make the property look not worth the trouble. That sounds simple until you realize work itself is a signal. Fresh dirt, stacked materials, new fencing, a tractor running. It all announces that someone is active and building. I started digging the trench on day 6. I did it in sections, not all at once, because a deep trench becomes a hazard to your own family if you rush it. I used the backhoe to cut a line around the most important perimeter first, then widened it, then deepened it. Dirt has weight, soil walls slump, roots fight you, rocks show up where you don't want them. I threw excavated soil inward to build a berm inside the fence line. The berm gave me height for visibility and created a thicker barrier on the inside, which matters when someone tries to push through. Sandra hated the trench immediately for the reason I should have anticipated. She saw it as a child hazard. I saw it as a delay mechanism for infected and people. We argued without shouting, because both of us were too tired to waste energy. She said Lucy would make one mistake and that mistake could kill her. I said Lucy wouldn't be outside alone. Sandra said that wasn't a plan, it was a hope. She was right. So I built an internal barrier line with rope and stakes to keep anyone from walking near the trench edge without thinking. I marked danger zones with bright tape. I didn't like how it looked. Sandra didn't care how it looked. She cared that Lucy stayed alive. Around day 7, the phone service started failing in small ways. Calls dropped, texts delayed, internet load times got weird. An emergency alert came across saying to shelter and avoid contact with aggressive or confused individuals. The wording stayed soft, but the frequency changed. Too many alerts means too many incidents. By day 8, I started building the wall in segments where my footings already existed. Concrete block, rebar tied in where possible, filled cores in critical spots. I wasn't building a castle, I was building a vertical barrier that couldn't be cut fast with hand tools. I covered fresh work for curing and rain protection because weak masonry becomes a failure point later. Life inside became routine and friction. Lucy got restless. She wanted to run in the yard. She wanted to climb on stacks of lumber because she was bored. Sandra held the line. Lucy did chores. Lucy did school worksheets even though school was closed because Sandra wanted her brain occupied and because routine keeps a child stable. Lucy didn't enjoy it. Lucy did it anyway. Sandra's parents still didn't answer. That silence grew heavier. She stopped calling every hour and started calling morning and night. Lucy asked once more about them. Sandra said she didn't know. Lucy stopped asking after that, which scared me more than the questions. Day 11. Daryl's family showed up. Mid-afternoon. Walking the road with backpacks and a rolling suitcase that caught on every patch of gravel. I saw them from the berm before they reached the property line. I grabbed my pistol and walked toward the fence line, staying behind cover when I could. The father raised his hands before I even spoke. He called out from the road without stepping closer. He introduced himself and asked the blunt question, did I understand what was happening? Or was I just building a fence because I liked projects? He sounded exhausted. His voice had the rough edge of a man who hadn't slept enough in days. I told him I understood. I told him to keep moving. I meant it. 4 mouths are one thing. 6 mouths are another. More people means more noise, more conflict, more disease risk, more exposure. I wasn't a villain for thinking it. I was being honest. He didn't beg in a dramatic way. He pointed at the trench line and the fence work and said he could see one man couldn't finish fast without help. He offered labor instead of pity. He said his wife could help inside. He said his older kid was strong enough to dig and haul. He said his younger kid would stay out of the way. He said he wasn't asking to be fed for free. Sandra stepped into view on the porch, enough for him to see a second adult and understand this wasn't a lone man playing fortress. Sandra asked the only question that mattered first. Any bites? She didn't say it soft. She said it as a requirement. They showed arms, legs, neck, scratches, bruises, nothing that looked fresh and deep. That didn't mean safe, but it meant not obviously doomed. We let them into the choke space one at a time. I checked again, keeping distance, looking for anything that didn't fit. We didn't do it with cruelty. We did it with survival logic. They slept in the unfinished garage area the first nights. Sandra insisted, and I agreed. The garage wasn't some clean guest room with a spare bed. It was concrete floor, exposed framing, stacked materials, a workbench, and the smell of sawdust and fuel that never fully leaves a build site. I had 1 old camping cot and 2 foam sleeping pads. The rest was blankets and whatever they carried. I cleared a space away from tools and away from anything sharp, then ran a line of tape on the floor to mark where our stuff ended and their stuff began. That tape wasn't magic. It was a boundary everyone could see without arguing. Before anyone unpacked, Sandra ran the first rule. No one walks deeper into the house until everyone washes hands, faces, and forearms. Soap, then a quick wipe with a weak bleach mix on a rag for anything that touched the road. Marissa didn't complain. She nodded and started helping the kids do it. Connor looked irritated, but he still held his arms out. Ellie watched Lucy through the open door with wide eyes, then copied what Lucy did when Lucy washed up. We gave them water and a basic meal, not a feast, enough. A bowl of soup, crackers, and a spoonful of peanut butter for each kid because it calms hunger faster than warm broth alone. I kept the food simple on purpose. First night isn't for bonding. First night is for stabilizing and watching. People show you who they are when they're hungry and tired and trapped in somebody else's space. The house felt smaller that evening, not because of physical space, but because risk doubled in the air. Every creak and footstep mattered. Every time Connor shifted on a sleeping pad, my brain tracked it. Every time Ellie whispered to her mother, I listened for tone and for words that didn't fit. Sandra watched all of it without making a show. She moved around the kitchen cleaning as she cooked, wiping counters even when they were already clean, keeping her hands busy so Lucy didn't read panic on her face. Lucy watched the new kids from a distance. She didn't hide. She just stayed near the hallway where she could retreat to her room if she wanted. Ellie looked scared but curious, eyes darting to the ceiling corners and the stacked bins, then back to Lucy as if Lucy was the guide for how to behave here. Connor looked angry at everything, not at one person, angry at the garage, angry at the rules, angry that he had to sleep on a floor. That kind of anger is common in older kids when life turns into a series of humiliations. It doesn't make him safe, It makes him readable. Marissa looked worn down in a way that told me she'd been holding a whole family together on fumes. Not crying, not dramatic, just moving with that tight economy of motion people get when they've already spent their last extra energy days ago. She kept touching Ellie's shoulder or hair, small grounding gestures, then checking Connor's face as if trying to keep him from saying something stupid. Daryl stayed polite, kept his voice steady, asked permission before stepping near anything, and kept his hands visible without being told. He'd done this dance before with someone else, or he'd at least thought about it. After dinner, I set the second rule. No one goes outside after dark, unless the house is on fire. No exceptions. If someone hears something, he comes to me or Sandra. No one runs to a window and yanks curtains back. Light discipline mattered now, even out here. A window glow at night can pull attention from the road. I didn't need to explain it twice. Daryl nodded. Marissa nodded. Connor rolled his eyes, then stopped when his father looked at him. I also set a quiet check system for the night. The garage door between the house and the garage stayed locked from our side. Not because I expected them to try something, but because if one of them was infected and turned during sleep, I wanted distance and a barrier. I didn't say that part out loud. I just called it security routine. Sandra understood anyway. She didn't argue. She asked one question later, when Lucy was brushing teeth. What if they freeze out there? I told her we'd give them more blankets, and we'd check on them in the morning. I didn't tell her I'd rather risk discomfort than risk a surprise in the hallway at 2 a.m. I slept in shorts and boots. Pistol close, not under a pillow, not in some fantasy spot, just within reach. I didn't sleep well. Every time the house settled, my eyes opened. Every time wind hit the siding, my hand moved. At some point near midnight, I heard Connor whispering in the garage. Daryl shut it down with a low, firm voice. No shouting, no lecture, just a quick stop. That mattered more than anything he could have promised. In the morning, before anyone ate, Sandra ran sanitation again. Hand wash, wipe down, bathroom rules. No one uses our main bathroom without checking in, and everyone wipes down surfaces after. Some people hear rules and take offense. Marissa asked where the supplies were and started wiping the sink without being told. That eased Sandra's shoulders a fraction. Lucy saw it too. Lucy's posture loosened, just a little. That's when I gave Daryl the first job. Strip his old house for anything useful if it was safe. Tools, blankets, canned food, medicine, batteries, any fuel containers, any vehicle keys he could find. Then check nearby areas carefully for gasoline. Fill every empty can he could find. If he had to take from empty houses, he should. I said it plain because dancing around it wastes time. Sandra's face tightened when she heard the part about taking from empty houses. She didn't argue in front of kids. She waited until Lucy and Ellie were in Lucy's room and the garage door was shut. Then she said low, "Stealing is going to bring trouble back here." She wasn't talking about morality. She was talking about consequences. I told her the trouble was already out there, and the bigger threat was running out of fuel and being forced to do loud work later when the area was more crowded with desperate people. I told her we'd be careful with what we took and where. Sandra didn't like it, but she didn't block it. She asked for one thing: no taking from houses that looked occupied, no pushing into someone else's survival. That line was fair. I agreed. Daryl and Connor left early. I watched them walk down the road until trees swallowed them. I didn't like sending them. I also didn't like the idea of doing every run myself. A single person doing all risk tasks becomes the single failure point. If I got hurt, the build stopped, the perimeter stopped, the house would become a pantry that someone else would take. While they were gone, Marissa stayed inside and helped Sandra without needing to be assigned. She asked where food was stored and didn't touch anything without permission. She asked what Lucy was allowed to do and what she wasn't. Sandra liked that. Sandra doesn't trust charm. She trusts process. Marissa followed process. I spent that morning on fence work again. Set more posts, mix concrete, level and brace. I kept the tractor off because it was a calm day, and sound traveled far. I did everything by hand until my shoulders burned. I stopped twice to scan the road. You can't build if you don't look up. Builders get killed that way even on normal jobs. Here, it could be worse. Around midday, Lucy asked if Ellie could come into the kitchen. Sandra hesitated, then said yes, as long as Ellie washed hands and stayed away from the tool area. Lucy led Ellie in with the stiff seriousness of a kid trying to play adult. Ellie asked where the bathroom was. Sandra answered, then added the wipe-down rule without softening it. Ellie nodded and did it. Lucy watched Ellie do it, then glanced at Sandra to see if that earned points. Sandra gave a small nod. Lucy looked proud for 2 seconds, then hid it. Connor returned before Daryl, which put my nerves up. He came through the gate space, breathing hard, face tight, eyes scanning behind him. I kept my pistol low, not pointing at him, but ready. He said his father was coming and told me they had gas. He sounded proud and angry at the same time, as if he didn't want to admit he needed our approval. Daryl came in 5 minutes later carrying 2 jerry cans and a toolbox that looked heavy enough to matter. He also had a box of batteries and a small stash of canned food. He didn't dump it on the ground. He set it down neatly and looked at me first, waiting for reaction. I nodded once and told him good work. His shoulders dropped a fraction. That's a man who's been running on tension and needed one small win. Then he gave the report that changed my whole posture. He said he saw a group of men at a closed convenience store, organized, using crowbars and a truck. Not infected, just men who moved like they'd done coordinated work before. He said one of them pointed down the road in our direction while talking to another man. Daryl didn't claim they followed. He didn't dramatize. He said it flat and factual, and that made it worse. From that moment on, I worked with the awareness of eyes on us. It changed my schedule. It changed noise choices. It changed how I handled light at night. I reduced generator use even more. I stopped running it for convenience. It ran only when the well demanded it, or when we needed a tool that couldn't be replaced by hand labor. I started hiding the useful stuff with intention. Materials that looked valuable from the road got moved behind the house and under tree cover. I stacked lumber low, not high, so it didn't silhouette. I covered pallets with old tarps that looked stained and torn, not fresh. I left a few pieces of junk outside the perimeter where someone could see them. Broken buckets, scrap boards, a bent piece of pipe. It was a story told through objects. This place is messy, picked over, not worth the trouble. Daryl helped with the outside work in the afternoons after his runs. He didn't grab tools and start doing things his way. He asked what I wanted first. I gave him the tasks that mattered but didn't risk structural mistakes. Hauling gravel, holding a post plumb while I set concrete, carrying chain link rolls into place. Connor did the heavy hauling without complaint once he realized work got him status. That's how you manage angry teenagers. Give them responsibility that has clear results. Sandra kept separation longer than Daryl probably liked, but Marissa didn't protest. We had a staged integration. First, garage sleeping only. Second, shared meals but with house rules. Third, shared chores. No free roaming through our living area. No digging through bins. No, I'll just grab something real quick. That kind of casual movement is how theft and fights start even among decent people. On the third night after they arrived, Connor tried to push a boundary. He stepped into the house past the entry and started walking toward the pantry bins without asking. Sandra snapped his name once, sharp, and he froze. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She pointed to the line on the floor and said the rule was the rule. Connor's face flushed and his hands balled for a second. Daryl stepped in quietly and told him to step back. Connor did it. He muttered something under his breath. Sandra didn't chase the mutter. She held eye contact and waited until he turned away. That was enough. It wasn't warmth. It was control. After that, I adjusted the system. I set up a small, shared shelf in the garage with basic food and water, something Daryl's family could access without asking every time. It reduced friction and kept them from feeling trapped. It also kept them out of our main storage. Trust grows better when it doesn't have to fight constant humiliation. Lucy and Ellie started circling each other less and talking more. It began with drawings and snacks. Then it became small questions. Ellie asked if the fence would keep the bad people out. Lucy said yes in a confident tone she didn't fully own yet. Ellie asked if the infected could climb. Lucy asked me that question later when Ellie wasn't around. I didn't lie. I said some might try, especially if they stacked at the fence. And that's why we kept bodies away from the wire and why I was building the wall. Lucy didn't ask follow-ups. She just nodded and went back to her room and drew a bigger trench in her picture. Marissa earned trust by doing the unglamorous things without being asked twice. She cleaned. She organized. She asked for a small bucket and started wiping doorknobs and light switches at night. Sandra noticed and stopped hovering as hard. That shift was quiet but important. Trust isn't a speech. Trust is a woman wiping a countertop at midnight because she knows sickness will kill kids faster than hero fantasies. A few days later, Daryl asked about night watch. He didn't ask it as a macho thing. He asked because he could see me running myself into the ground. I didn't want to hand security to someone new. I also didn't want to be the only one awake every night. We compromised. I took first watch until about 11, staying quiet, checking the perimeter from inside the fence line. Listening. Daryl took the early morning window before dawn, when most people get sloppy. We kept it simple. No wandering the property, no standing in open view, just controlled checks and listening. During those days, the outside world kept proving it was breaking in layers. Phones worked sometimes and failed other times. News became repetitive, then sparse. Emergency alerts shifted from instructions to broad warnings, as if someone was pressing a button out of habit while the rest of the system burned. A nearby town issued a curfew message. The next day, another message came cancelling it without explanation. That's not leadership. That's a sign the person sending messages doesn't know what is actually enforceable. Around day 15, the hard rain hit. It wasn't a gentle drizzle. It was heavy, steady rain that turned the soil into slurry and made every unfinished earthwork show its weaknesses. Trenches filled, berm edges slumped, fence posts leaned where the ground softened. I had planned drainage, but plan and reality don't match when a storm decides to sit on you for hours. I spent that day in a soaked jacket, shoveling gravel into low spots, bracing fence sections with lumber, cutting small channels to redirect runoff away from the house. Mud got everywhere. My boots gained weight with every step. Tools slipped out of my hands. If you drop a wrench in mud and need it later, you waste 10 minutes searching while water keeps rising. That's how survival works. It isn't one big dramatic moment. It is a pile of small failures waiting to cascade. Sandra tried to keep everyone inside during the worst of it. The kids wanted to watch the storm through the window slits. Sandra blocked the view with her body and gave them jobs. Fold blankets, sort batteries, refill water bottles, write down how many canned meals we had. Lucy did it with the seriousness of a kid trying to be useful. Ellie copied her. Connor paced in the garage, angry because he couldn't do anything outside. Marissa made him sweep the garage floor and move wet gear away from dry supplies. He complained once. She told him to do it anyway. He did. By evening, the well pump started acting up. It wasn't a full failure. It was pressure drops and strange cycling, the kind that happens when water tables shift and electrical load gets weird. We needed pressure for sanitation and for flushing. That meant generator time. I didn't like it. The generator was a dinner bell for anyone within earshot. I built a muffling box around it with plywood and insulation scraps, leaving airflow gaps so it wouldn't overheat and die. I didn't seal it tight. That would have been stupid. I used baffles that forced the sound to bounce and lose energy before it escaped. It helped. It didn't make it quiet. In wet air, sound carries farther. That was simple physics. An hour after the generator started, I saw movement down the road. 2 infected drifting toward the sound. Not fast, not coordinated, just bodies pulled by noise and instinct. Then a third, then a fourth. They hit the outer fence and grabbed and pushed, hands sliding on metal, teeth clicked on wire. They didn't care about shredded skin or torn nails. I didn't shout. I didn't fire. I waved Daryl over with a hand signal. He came out with the shotgun and stopped beside me, waiting. I told him no shooting unless the fence was failing. He nodded. Connor appeared behind him, wide-eyed, holding a shovel like it was a weapon from a video game. Daryl snapped at him to stay back. Connor stopped and backed up. That was another small trust deposit. Daryl controlled his kid when it mattered. We handled it with distance tools and leverage, a long pry bar through the fence openings to shove them off the wire, a heavy board to pin a shoulder and redirect their weight. When one got a grip and started wrenching hard enough to shake a post, I ended it quickly and moved on. No long struggle, no wasted energy. We dragged bodies away so they didn't pile and create a ramp. It took time. It was ugly work. When it was over, my arms shook from effort, not fear, and I didn't stand there staring. I went straight back to the trench line and checked for new slumps. Sandra kept the kids inside and busy. She didn't let Lucy stand at a window listening and building pictures in her head. She had Lucy and Ellie sorting supplies, folding blankets, wiping surfaces, doing small tasks that created control. That was her way of fighting, and it worked. When the noises stopped, the girls didn't rush out asking what happened. They stayed inside and waited for an adult to tell them what was next. That is discipline, and discipline keeps children alive. The rain eased overnight and stopped by the next day. Everything outside looked different in daylight. The yard was scarred with runoff channels. A trench section had slumped inward and tugged on a fence corner. Not a full breach yet, but a weak point. Weak points don't stay small when pressure comes. I spent that day fixing the damage without rushing. First, I stabilized the corner with lumber braces so it couldn't pull farther. Then, I repacked the base with gravel, not soft dirt, because gravel drains and doesn't slump as easily. Then, I cut a shallow drainage path toward a low area away from the house so the next rain wouldn't flood the same spot. It was slow, dirty work, the kind nobody wants to do when adrenaline is gone and exhaustion is settling in. Daryl and Connor stayed close while I worked. Connor wanted to prove himself after the fence incident. I put him on moving gravel and tamping with a hand tool. He tried to rush. I stopped him and made him do it correctly. Bad tamping becomes another slump. Connor didn't like being corrected. He still did it. Marissa checked on him once, touched his shoulder, then walked away without praise. She knew praise would make him push harder and get sloppy. That afternoon, I walked the whole perimeter and looked for anything else the storm had loosened. Fence tension, post lean, gate sag. Any sign that someone had come close while we were distracted. Mud holds footprints. I found a set near the road, not fresh enough to know who made them. Still, it tightened my throat. Someone had walked near our place during the storm, close enough to see the work. That night, we kept the generator off and relied on stored water and careful use. Sandra rationed water without making it feel punitive. No long showers, quick wipes, dishes cleaned in a small basin, not under running water. Everyone learned to treat clean water as a tool, not a comfort. Day 18 was the day sirens died. We'd heard them in the distance for weeks, fewer each day, but still enough to pretend someone was out there doing a job. That morning, one long siren wailed far away and faded. After that, nothing. No sirens, no helicopter thumps, no distant traffic hum. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was an empty signal. It meant fewer responders, fewer working vehicles, fewer people following normal routines. It meant whatever order existed had stopped reaching this far, or it had broken into small pockets that didn't care about us. That evening, we ate in near silence. Not because we wanted gloom, but because everyone was thinking the same thought, and nobody wanted to say it first. We were past the point where you could expect a clear announcement or a rescue plan. We were in the phase where you build and maintain your own rules, and you assume anything outside your fence is unpredictable. That changed how I looked at the half-finished wall, the trench line, the sagging fence corner I'd just repaired. It wasn't a project anymore. It was the line between our home and the part of the world that had stopped pretending it was safe. Around day 20, Sandra said out loud what she'd been holding back. Her parents weren't coming. She didn't break down theatrically. She said it flat, staring at her phone, looking at the last delivered message from her mother about packing. Lucy overheard from the hallway. Lucy didn't cry. Lucy walked into her room and shut the door with careful hands. Sandra stared at the door and didn't move for a long moment because she was choosing whether to follow and show Lucy her own collapse. That night, I walked the perimeter alone and checked everything twice. Locks, tension wire, gate braces, trench markers, wall segments. I listened for movement beyond the fence and heard faint noise in the distance that didn't belong to wind or animals. I didn't name it. I just kept moving and kept checking because doing something felt better than standing still with the truth. The last week of the month turned into grind. Build, secure, listen, eat, sleep, repeat. Daryl and Connor ran scavenging trips in daylight with simple rules. No crowds, no fights, no hero moves. Sometimes they returned with fuel and batteries. Sometimes they returned empty and tense, talking about people on the road watching houses, talking about a roadblock made of abandoned cars, talking about smoke from a place that hadn't had smoke the day before. Marissa held the inside together with Sandra. The two of them built routines that kept the kids stable and kept the house from becoming a garbage-smelling disease box. Cleaning, water handling, food rotation, quiet hours. Where shoes go, where dirty clothes go, where tools get placed. Sandra respected her because she didn't fight rules for pride. On day 25, two men walked past on the road slowly and stopped at the property line. I saw them from the berm, not infected, calm, cautious, eyes scanning. One pointed at the trench and the new fence work. The other stared at the house for a long moment. I didn't wave. I didn't shout. I stayed out of clear sight and let the place look messy and half abandoned. I kept the generator off that day and kept everyone inside longer than usual. Lucy complained once. Sandra shut it down. Lucy went quiet, and that quiet carried into the evening. Day 27. Something happened on the road that tested the hardest part of survival. Watching suffering and not opening your gate. A woman from a nearby house ran into the road screaming. She bent over and retched, then stood up and staggered. A man ran after her, shouting her name. When he reached her, she turned and grabbed him and bit into his shoulder and didn't let go. He screamed and tried to pry her off. She clung and tore, not caring about his hands hitting her face. I watched from the berm, and my mind tried to push me into action. Go help. Go do something. That instinct is human. It is also dangerous when your first duty is the family behind you. If I opened the gate, I would bring that scene to my fence line. I would pull infected closer to the house. I would broadcast that we were home and we cared, which means we had supplies and structure. Daryl stood beside me and said one word, low, not angry. No, he wasn't controlling me. He was stopping me from doing something that would kill all of us. More figures drifted out of trees and yards, drawn by the screaming. The road turned into a place nobody could survive in open air. I stepped down off the berm and went back inside and locked the door. Sandra read my face and didn't ask for details. She asked if we were compromised. I said no. She nodded once and went back to the kids. By day 30, the first layer of fence was mostly complete where it mattered. The trench was continuous in the key sections. The wall had risen enough along the core sides that it felt real, not just planned. We weren't safe. We were harder to reach. That difference matters. Safety is a word that comforts people. Harder to reach is a condition you can maintain if you keep paying the cost. That evening, we ate together at the table. A simple meal. Quiet conversation that didn't drift into big speeches because nobody had the energy. Connor ate fast and kept watching windows. Ellie copied Lucy's movements and stayed close to her. Lucy talked a little about a drawing she'd made of the property, fence and trench included. No people in the drawing, just the structure. Sandra noticed. Marissa noticed. Nobody commented because nobody wanted to pull Lucy into a talk she couldn't handle yet. After dinner, I walked the perimeter again with a covered flashlight. I checked locks and hinges and gate braces. I listened. Far away, one gunshot cracked and then nothing. No sirens followed. No engines. Just wind, tree movement, and faint sound in the distance that didn't belong to normal nightlife. I went back inside and locked the door with hands that felt older than they should. Day 30 ended without rescue and without closure. We had routines, a perimeter, and a small group that could work. Sandra had no word from her parents. Lucy was quieter than she used to be. Daryl's family added labor and added risk. The world beyond our fence was still full of hungry infected, and people making choices that would eventually crash into ours. I sat on the edge of the living room where drywall ended and studs began, and understood something that didn't feel dramatic, just heavy and real. Building defenses isn't a finish line, it's a job that never ends, and the day you stop paying attention is the day you lose everything. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you, what moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.